everyone. My name is Mark Vina, and welcome to the SmartTechCheck podcast, where we cover all tech topics that are smart home automation, security, and console gaming related. Today is Tuesday, March 23rd, 2021. I hope all of you are safe and well. Spring is almost here. We've got lots of interesting consumer tech topics to talk about. For today's podcast, I want to bring you three journalists many of you know well. That's Rob Pegoraro. Rob, let me bring you up on the screen so we can all see your smiling face. And there we go. It's fantastic what technology can do. Rob is a writer for USA Today and Yahoo Tech. John Quain, who writes for the New York Times and Digital Trends, among other publications. And my go-to person about baseball history, how to say that, Stewart? Stewart Wolpin, who writes for Twice and Laptop magazines. Guys, how are you?
Good.
What is new in your life? I'll start with Rob. Give you a softball question, Rob.
I was going to say gardening season. You know, opening day of my lawn was last weekend, I think, officially. So very exciting stuff. No, it's this weird sort of time in tech where a lot of things that would normally be happening are not. You know, we didn't have MWC 3 weeks ago. We didn't have South by Southwest 2 weeks ago. We may or may not have MWC in June. We'll talk about that later on. We were supposed to have an Apple event right now, actually, and those moves were all wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So we're just sort of here, existing.
It's kind of weird. I've never talked to so many people who just say, I want to go to a crowded airport. I want to get an apartment. And I want to go back to the way things were.
Yeah.
Over. John?
Yes. What's new with me?
Yeah.
Well, the same sorts of things. You know, the things that didn't happen. Vaccines. That's all anybody can really talk about around New York City is vaccine. But also exchange. That's probably the biggest. Trying to ignore it. Let's pretend it didn't happen. Everything's infected. Oh, it doesn't matter. Big problem. That's probably the biggest thing for me right now.
And so what have you been doing with your time over the last few months since class? And by the way, I love Rob's description of what you just did. You got a firmware upgrade.
Yes, I got my second shot. I'm a very happy man. I will be clear for opening day at Citi Field. So I'm anxious for that. And I know Rob and I are going to be fighting with each other on April 1st when the Mets and the National meet on actual opening day in Washington.
I do owe you a ticket to Nats Park at some point, although since it'll be 5,000 fans limited on that first day, pretty sure our 20-game season ticket group will not be on that list of the elite of.
Yeah, they're potting us at Citi Field, so there'll be about 8,500 at opening day at Citi Field, and I already got my pod seat assignment as a full season ticket holder.
How are they determining that, by the way? Is it a lottery?
I don't think it's a lottery because I'm only one section over, and I had been in a back row where the ushers would be behind me. So I think what they did was that they eliminated the back rows, and I'm on the second deck. Most season ticket holders are on field level, so they probably had to spread out even more. Since I'm upstairs, there are fewer season ticket holders, so that's why I'm only a section over. But I'm assuming that they simply went by how much money you spent on them. Is my assumption.
Go figure.
What I would have chosen, which is longevity. I've been a season ticket holder since 1983.
Right.
But I don't know. I'm only a section over, so I can't complain. Right now, it's only for April. So perhaps in a month from now, they'll raise it up to 30 or 40%, and I'll be able to get back to my regular seat.
Well, I envy both of you, or all three of you, if you're going to New York baseball, because I cannot wait to go myself. And really, that's one of the reasons why I'm getting the vaccines. No other reason, so I can go to a baseball game.
Whatever it takes. Yeah. No, I miss paying $12 for a beer. I would love to do that.
Well, that was $12 last season. The price
Yeah.
went up a little bit after the vaccine, because we got to take care of those $1 million salaries.
If only they were just $1 million.
Yeah, right. I'm thinking back in 1975 when they paid Catfish Hunter, what was it, $3 million for 5. It was $3 million for 5 seasons. 600,000.
It was at the time an outlandish amount, worth every penny.
That's crazy. But let's get on to some questions I want to ask you folks about different tech topics that have been in the news recently, and just get your reaction to it. First one is Apple's Phantom March 23rd announcement. I'm sure each of you read about this, but today Apple was supposed to announce a bunch of new things. It turns out that it was a head fake, that Apple was doing it because they wanted to flesh out who were, leaking information over at good old at the venerable Cupertino company. And I guess for those of us who have been familiar with Apple and have worked with them in the past, this is not unusual behavior. This is a classic Steve Jobs maneuver. But Rob, let me get your reaction to that.
Yeah, it was weird. I sort of had to take a step back, like, wait a minute, why is no one talking about the Apple event on Twitter? Did I miss it or something? Oh, wait, never happened. Yeah, usually, though, the message discipline there extends to even the leaks. So the leaks are, at least when they come from when was the last time Mark Gurman was wrong about an Apple event? Really anything about that company. So it's so strange. And meanwhile, we know they need to announce a new iMac because they're selling out of all the existing models. Yeah. The iPad has been around a while. We'd like to know about this mystery sensor in the HomePod Mini, so that they've got lots of storylines to clean up.
Yeah, it's funny that the way Apple kind of communicates to the marketplace that new stuff is coming is when they're running out of the old stuff. It's unbelievable the scrutiny that they get at the inventory level. It's just amazing in terms of you can pretty much predict pretty closely. All their old stuff is going out the window. Now it's time to announce new stuff. John, your reaction?
They're not as relevant somehow. I mean, it's people buy a tremendous number of their products, so they're relevant that way. But in terms of, are they going to do something new? I wasn't really looking at that. I was more interested in this, which is the OnePlus, hassle.
Oh, you got it.
Phone. So that was happening anyway, and that's sort of what I was focused on. I love it. It's such a cool phone, but but I wasn't really looking for anything except would there be more M1 products? People are asking me around now, should I get a new laptop? And the 16-inch doesn't have that yet. So it's
JQ, should I get a new Mac Mini or should I hold off because the next one's coming around soon?
I would wait,
Okay.
It's wait. You made it this far.
Me money.
It's like the pandemic. You made it this far, just a little bit longer.
I hope they don't come out with another M1, an M1 Plus Mac Mini, because I just bought one in December, and I don't want to have to keep buying Mac ones every time they come out with new silicon. That drives me crazy. Stuart, your thoughts on Apple shenanigans with Phantom announcement days?
Well, there have been so many teases about so many products, the AirPod Lights or the AirPod 3s. There's been off and on rumors about that. There have been off and on rumors about the M1X or the M2. From a personal point of view, my MacBook Pro is coughing up blood. And I am anxiously waiting a 15 or 16-inch version with maybe an M1X or M2, which supposedly will be available in late Q3 or early Q4. So I think it's not only the rumor of whatever the date was. I think the date is less important, quite frankly, than the tease that they've had for all these other things that are supposedly in the pipeline, like AirTags. There are all these things that have been rumored literally for 6 months or more that we haven't yet seen. So the date is less important to me than when these products are actually going to hit the market. If your mention of the date was a tease, whether or not Apple's running up the flagpole on all of these products just to see whether or not they're leaking or not. So I think the date is only one minor piece of this whole charade. And I think it's much more on all of these products that have been rumored to be coming, but for some reason have yet to appear.
Well, it's just fascinating to me just the lengths that Apple will go to flesh out a leaker from the company. That's the thing that to me is endlessly fascinating.
Well, even though you may be paranoid, somebody may be chasing you.
Yeah, right.
Well, I want John, you teed this topic up. Microsoft Exchange server hacks. Microsoft's had some bad publicity over the last week or so.
Oh my God. This is affects hundreds of thousands of servers around the world. There's 0-day attacks. They started in January. It's so bad. I can't even explain how bad it is. I mean, it basically lets you into, once you're in there for good. People have intruded on tens of thousands of systems that we know of already. It took Microsoft almost 2 months to come up with some patches for this. And even at that, by that time, it's too late. You can't patch it and then discover that you've been hacked. It doesn't show or reveal whether you've been hacked or not, because part of the hack is you get authenticated. You're an authenticated user. There's just no way to tell. You need other tools on top of that to figure out if you've been broken into. It may take people a long time to figure this out, and it just shows the vulnerability of, sort of relying on one piece of software. Once they're in, they're in. It's pretty bad.
Rob, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's another blow to on-premise computing. Cloud mail services, they have lots of other advantages, but at least they're easier to patch at scale, and the software isn't actually resident on your own system. And of course, we now have this other problem that a lot of systems have gotten patched, but others have not still. And, it's great that it has been happening as fast as it has. It's almost like following vaccination totals. But, nobody waits to get their Gmail patched.
Yeah, except that, so it's great to put it in the cloud, but the Russians hacked the 365 version. So they hacked the cloud version. And not only that, they hacked the token system. That was supposed to be
right.
At last, absolutely save you no matter what happens. You've got these tokens, you can't beat them. They totally beat that system. So then the Chinese come along and hack the other side, the exchange servers all over the planet. It's a nightmare. It's also like, you don't have to be using Exchange. If you had email back and forth with anybody that was on Exchange, I mean, basically they have all that information. You have access. And once they announced the patches, the Chinese hacking group went ballistic, and they just kind of released it. Everybody knew what to do. And they went after all the systems. They've never seen anything like it, because then it was no more secret anymore. So it's still ongoing. It hasn't stopped.
Do you think they've been, Rob? Well, let me tee this up for Stewart or Rob. What about their transparency? Has Microsoft performed in the kind of response?
I'm going to speak. I want to address this on a much larger scale. It's really funny or interesting to me. I've been writing a lot about PC security software, and I've been talking to a lot of the testing labs over the last couple of years. And this is sort of like akin somewhat to COVID-19 to a certain extent, in that people were predicting a global pandemic for a long time. And it was a matter of preparedness. And to a certain extent, these kinds of widespread hacks are in some way the same way as the predictors of global pandemics, in that they are going to happen. To think that they're not going to happen is just naive. And so the fact that the industry always seems to be reactive to this sort of stuff. Now, there are some companies that are trying to be proactive. Apple is very active in hiring hackers to try to hack into their system and reporting things, but that is more the exception than it is the rule. And so I think a bigger problem for the entire industry is that all of this is a disaster waiting to happen, and the industry insists, I won't say insists, I shouldn't say that, but they always seem to be scrambling to catch up instead of trying to get ahead of them. And I'm not sure that there is a solution other than going out and hiring the hackers to work for you, which happens a lot in security circumstances where con artists and what are hired by the FBI essentially. But this continually scrambling to plug holes is just a losing game. And unless something radically changes with Microsoft or any of these big companies, this is just a hint of things to come.
I'm very depressed after that answer.
Either, but
Rob, go ahead.
So, two things. Number one, yes, absolutely, companies should be hiring people to try to pen test their systems. Red teaming is basic security. I think this also points to, all of us used to spend a lot of time in airplanes, and it's a safe way to travel because there's a culture of not punishment, but fix it. If something goes wrong on an airplane, we document it, we write it down, and we publish it so it never happens again. And there's no equivalent to that kind of NTSB-led culture of safety in cybersecurity. After a lot of big ransomware incidents, instead you find the company involved doesn't want to say what happened, so everybody else is free to make the same mistake and also get pwned later on. And we've got to do better.
Rob, are you advocating an FCC for cybersecurity? Is that
well, we actually have the Cybersecurity Information Security Administration. I think I got that right, which is in business to try to do this sort of thing, but it's also a very new organization. Mm-hmm. So, you need some sort of public-private collaboration because, you're not necessarily going to get one company invite its competitors. Here's how we screwed up. Take a look. Somebody has got to sort of take the lead and enable that sharing of, what went wrong, what is there to learn. And it's happening on lots of different levels. There are these ISACs, information security,
right?
I'm blanking on my acronyms today.
Right.
Where, companies and organizations can share confidentially what went wrong. So we're sort of moving in the right direction, but this is a reminder when you have an asymmetric threat like this, where it doesn't take that much effort to hack a server from somewhere in St. Petersburg, you can't just leave it to each company to fight off the attacks by themselves and not know what everyone else has picked up on.
Yes.
It's all about it. There have been ISAC and cooperation and stuff. I mean, you can't be too transparent because look what happened in this case. The minute they told people there were these 4 hacks, those hackers went wild. They scanned every node, every network all across the globe. They went for it, right? Because they thought time's up, get as much information as I can. So, the transparency thing is tricky. It's the money. It's always the money, right? These companies never pay for any of these flaws, right? You get hacked, you lose all your data. Tough. So you need to have some financial repercussions. You need to have some financial penalties. If you lose information like that, or you get a hack like that and you didn't take sufficient, precautions, Microsoft should be paying, Apple should be paying, Google should be paying. All these people have been hacked. There's nobody's been sort of off the hook. Until that starts to happen, I don't really see it changing. There's no money in it,
I'm not sure if opening the way for more class action lawsuits is necessarily the optimum way out of this, though.
No, but John does have a point, though. The consequences are not changing the behavior,
right?
And I think that's something the industry has to deal with. This is my favorite topic of the ones that we're talking about. There was a teardown of the new HomePod Mini, and it revealed a secret temperature sensor. And I know that, Rob, I know that you're concerned that people are going to be able to hack your house and find out that your air conditioning is at an illegal level or something like that. But it is interesting that Apple would integrate that kind of sensor, but then not making a lot of noise about it. So let me start with Rob. Rob, what are your thoughts? Were you surprised when you saw this?
I'm more surprised Apple hasn't made a run at this category because on the one hand, the leading smart thermostat, Google's Nest, has not done all that well from Google's stewardship. Google took it over, killed off the entire Works with Nest ecosystem. They've sort of merged it into the rest of their smart home strategy, which is still a mess. Like it's Google is not a company I have a whole lot of confidence will carry through a hardware strategy outside of things that, outside of Android and cloud services. Everything else like smartwatches, no, I don't want to hear about Wear OS. They've completely blown that. So it seems like there's an opportunity for Apple to be the privacy optimized smart home company, starting with something as basic as the thermostat. And they haven't done that. So they've had this dormant part. And I don't know how nobody discovered this before. Didn't iFixit do a teardown of this thing from day one?
They missed it. So either it's embedded so well that it took this much time to discover.
Apparently it's like the size of a grain of rice or something.
Yeah, that's really what it boiled down to. But let me tell you something. Apple is not going to put that ingredient in this product unless they have plans for it. They just didn't do it by accident. So either they haven't yet had a chance to announce whatever type of capability that's going to allow you to take advantage of that. But it's just kind of strange the way those kind of things are disclosed. Stuart, what are your thoughts?
Well, at first I thought I was reading about the appendix. This vestigial, organ that really didn't serve any purpose. But two things occurred to me. One was what you guys have been talking about, which is essentially future usage, that the HomePod would suddenly become a temperature humidity sensor that would then automatically trigger fans or air conditioners that were part of the HomeKit system. The one thing I haven't heard about was maybe the cigar is just a cigar. Maybe it's just a temperature humidity sensor to sense if the speaker itself is overheating. Otherwise, why wouldn't Apple have done? The HomePod, it was in the original HomePod also, if I understand if what I'm reading is to be believed. And so why they haven't done anything about that until now, or haven't done anything about it until now, doesn't seem to make much sense. This is not a company that sits around going, should we do this? That's not who they are. And they certainly have enough HomeKit partners that if there was this capability built into the HomePod, the original, which is 3 years old already? Somebody would have, a thermostat maker or somebody would have hooked into this already. What's taking this so long? So the fact that it's in there and for future use just doesn't seem to make any sense to me, considering how long it's been there.
Yeah, I wondered whether or not it was just part of the, the system on a chip sort of integration. Like Bluetooth used to be in phones for about a year and a half before it was enabled because the carriers didn't want to pay for the feature, but it was already in the phone. It came in those Samsung phones. It was just built
radios too.
Yeah. So, that often happens with products like this where it has features like that, but they're either not enabled or it's just because they're part of that, what the original circuit design was. And it's too expensive to change it, cheaper just to leave it the way it is, even though they're not using it. I'm thinking about heartbeats. Don't you want to talk about heartbeats? That's the one that kind of freaked me out. that sensing your heart.
I'll let you. Yes, go ahead, John.
Yeah, well, that there are microphones in these devices. What can they hear? How when we learn about ultrasonic hearing in some of these speaker systems, that starts to get kind of creepy, right? And this idea that these researchers came along and said, hey, we could use this, like you could do the fitness tracking watches to measure your heart rate and to see if there's an arrhythmia or not. Well, I've got a couple of smart speakers around that just gets kind of creepy to me. Anyway.
John, you need to get out of the house, really.
Don't we all?
Right.
They're creeping up on you.
Right.
Well, this is your topic. You wanted to talk a bit about your tips about improving your Zoom technique.
Yes, don't pay any attention to what you see behind me.
What is that?
It is, I freely admit, a bed sheet, because what's behind the bed sheet is even worse than the bed sheet. I live in a tiny New York City apartment, and like John, my background is just a mess. And I'm glad this particular platform allows a different back screen, but I'd have to get a green screen first. But the reason I wanted to bring this up, and I'm always shocked when I watch all of the CNNs and the MSNBCs and the Foxes, and they have these remote, and now everybody's interviewed remote. Nobody's in the studio. And it's fascinating to me to see the quality of the connection, of the lighting, of the sound changing so radically from interview to interview. And let's not even talk how many people fail to have a copy of The Power Broker on the shelf behind them. But that's a different topic. And so I think since we're professionals, I've often noticed that a lot of people use the Ring lights, which I don't use because they reflect off of glasses. So I put a baby spot, which needs to be replaced because it's fading out on me. But I put a baby spot above me to sort of give me a better light. I think, Mark, you must be in sunlight. You must have a bay window or something opposite you, because you're bathed in sunlight.
I do.
Which
I
not
have a
everybody.
window. Well, I do have a wife. I do. I've been doing these so long. So, and one of the tips I would give people is that you get better over time. Your first podcast is never going to be your best podcast. You tend to get better and a bit more sophisticated. And I think the key thing is lighting. Having you don't have to go crazy with lighting. I mean, I look at Stewart. I look at your studio, and you clearly didn't spend $500,000 maximizing.
Maybe $50.
Yeah, where'd you get that bed sheet? Did you go to Target? Is that
No, it came out of the closet. It's an old bed sheet. It's only yellow because it's old. And I also invested in a good microphone, so I didn't sound like I just sound like this coming for just using the computer microphone. So sound and vision I think are really critical parts to. So when you come across, because nothing ruins what you're talking about if nobody can see or hear you.
Well, and on that point, and Rob, you and I have talked about this before, it's shocking to me, using Stewart's commentary, that on professional broadcast networks, if you were going to appear on CNN or Fox or MSNBC or whatever, you would think you'd go out and spend a few dollars and get a high quality microphone. And a lot of the folks that get interviewed professionally, I mean, they can afford to get a Yeti microphone or whatever brand you want to call it, because the audio, especially audio, video, at the end of the day, video is important. Maybe not everybody wants to have
There's a lot of bad webcams out there too.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But isn't it shocking to you that audio is so overlooked because it's such important quality?
The way I put it, the pep talk I gave to a friend of mine who was going to do her first virtual panel a few weeks ago was, don't worry, someone else is going to be much less prepared than you. You will look great in comparison, because there's always somebody who not only do they ignore the producer's request to have a plain backdrop, they have like a ceiling fan spinning above their head. And it's not even like a good mistake, like having a cat or a baby wander in. I did actually lock the door of my office so my cat does not make a cameo here, because he probably would want to check out the ring light and then step on the keyboard and log me off.
John, your 2 cents on how people can improve their Zoom technique.
Well, yeah, I think it's just a different, interesting. I'm not for the blank backgrounds. But the lackadaisical attitude is, if you've ever done, like, NBC has what they call a nook in 30 Rock, and it's like on the 27th floor or something, and you wend your way through these hallways, and it's near the Saturday Night Live studio, and you just show up, and it's like a closet with a bunch of cameras in there, and you put the IFB in, and somebody says, okay, you're on in like 10 seconds. And there's not a lot. They just have relied on those systems for so long that this idea of like connecting over Skype or Zoom or something, they just expect it's going to work like that. And of course, the bandwidth, to me, the killer is the bandwidth.
Yes.
Here in New York, Spectrum is awful. So sometimes I have a really great connection, and sometimes it's really terrible. I've been testing Elon Musk's Starlink.
Oh,
Really?
Yeah. So
up in Vermont.
you can see the review online, and my video of me running around in the snow trying to find the right spot for the
Where's the review, John?
Tom's Guide.
Okay.
So you'll see it at Tom's Guide. There's a full review there, and it's interesting, but it's intermittent. So, and this is asynchronous. Doing video calls is synchronous, and those systems are asynchronous. So you get like a terrific download speed, and then it'll drop out. So it's not quite there yet, but it has a lot of promise. And in places like Vermont, places like that, there is no other option. There's no cellular service for most of the state. DSL is the only thing. You can't get cable. And the other satellite systems, somebody had posted on one of my reviews, there are these satellites. They're awful. I've tested.
You don't want those.
You've done the Hughes, and you've done, what's the other one? ViaNet?
Yeah, they don't. They're like a 44,000 mile round trip.
Right.
Yeah.
So the latency on those systems is terrible. So what's that? I can't see it.
I can't see it either.
Starlink.
Your review.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Oh, there you go. Well, you also have to remember that the Starlink, they're only about 10% of the satellites. I think they've launched 120 satellites out of the 12,000. Well, I think it's 1%. So there's a lot more satellites that need to go up, and that may improve. I won't improve the latency necessarily, but it might improve the connection viability.
Yeah, it should improve. They're up at about 1,100, 1,200 right now, and
they're up to that already.
Well,
yeah,
but, every launch.
I was right, 10%.
They're around the U.S.-Canadian border, so they seem to be strung along the 49th parallel. They're like, so you have to kind of aim, the dish, whereas hopefully you won't have to as much anymore. And I tested in blizzards. We had a lot of snow and stuff, and it still managed to work. I mean, it's got a lot of promise. The other rocket that they keep testing that landed, but then one of the legs broke and it exploded. That rocket system can launch something like 400 of those satellites at once. So that's why they want to get that up and going, because then you'll send up as many as you need to send up. And they have a failure rate of a couple of percent. So even though all these little satellites are floating around there, some of them fail right from the start. So you have to remember this. A lot of work that goes into this, but I'm hopeful. I can download a 4K movie in the country finally. So.
Keep dreaming, John. Keep dreaming. That will happen one day. Rob, Apple's app tracking transparency prompt. That was a kind of a bit of interesting news a few days ago.
Yeah, it's been weird because if you read this from the perspective of what Facebook has said about this, which is the prompt Apple's going to show you, you may already see it. I saw it in Sling TV's app. Allow Sling TV to track your activity across other companies' apps and websites. Right. And then the company can make their defense of allowing this. This information may be used to better personalize your experience by showing you relevant ads, which is not a great sales job by Sling. Facebook has said, this is going to kill local business. It's terrible. And everyone's like, really? Meanwhile, Google said, we'll just stop this tracking. We'll stop analyzing your usage, which they should be able to. Don't they already know enough about me? Twitter has said they'll keep doing it, but they're going to work on the language in this prompt. And they said maybe this will actually make us more competitive against companies that have been able to put all this data together by seeing what you do in other apps. Yelp sort of gave me an inconclusive answer. Snapchat said, we're going to keep doing it, but we think it's a good move overall. So there's a lot of equanimity across the part of big tech that doesn't include Facebook. And then I also talked to a mobile marketing consultant who said, this is for a USA Today story that ran last weekend. This is going to hurt smaller developers who rely on ads to monetize their apps and who place ads to try to get customers for them. And he said, look, it really does make the advertising less valuable, less accurate, less efficient. But of course, the smaller developers get the least amount of say in this. And, they're just going to have to live with it because Apple has made its choice. And he expects Google will have some version of this, since we've seen this in general good competition between Apple and Google to sort of match each other feature for feature. One version of iOS, you see something like it in the next version of Android.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. John, any thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting to me because there's this whole business that goes on of selling this data and aggregating this data. There are companies that have no apps at all. They have nothing to do with apps, but they have the data and they grab the data and then they resell it, aggregated together, all sorts of information from, city infrastructure kind of information, data about traffic and where people are and what they're doing. It goes into a lot of research, and all that information there's a marketplace for that. This, in theory could kill it, but actually I think a lot of people just click, yeah, whatever. If there was a yeah, whatever button, they would be clicking that. I don't know what impact it'll really have, but it is just a kind of reminder to people that they are sort of being tracked and followed everywhere. But I think in the end, people just click yes or whatever.
I mean, that's part of the problem. Someone downloads an app, they want to use the app so quickly, they fly right through the EULA. If there is one that you can see at the beginning of the experience, they could care less. And by the way, the app guys know that. And by the way, most of the EULAs are written. You need to be a lawyer with 45 years of legal experience to understand the agreements in detail. They're not written in very plain spoken English.
No, and even TVs are doing, televisions. I got 3 in here right now, new TVs, and they even have that. And their privacy thing, if you start to look at it, and they want your credit card information and stuff, you don't actually have to give them any of that information. But finding a way around it, way at the bottom of the screen, it's difficult. They make it as hard as possible.
Stewart, any thoughts?
Yeah, the cynic in me is saying, yeah, thanks. You're a decade too late. This to me is such a pebble in the ocean. I used to say when people were talking about privacy, we're talking decade or more ago. Even before all of this, people were worrying about how much information are these companies getting and all of this. And I said, if you want privacy, go into your bathroom and lock the door, and don't take your phone with you.
You did see the fully connected toilet at CES, right?
This whole conversation to me is just so nuts. Oh, thank you. You're giving us this little token of privacy. Oh, thank you, lords of Apple. It's like, it's too late. Our stuff is out there, so it's going to stop them from collecting a little more. And somebody's not going to figure out a way of getting around it, or you use so many other devices that they'll get the information from someplace. This is going to inconvenience a few people for a short period of time, but the whole idea of keeping our lives privacy, I gave that up, decades ago. Let's come to the understanding that we live in a society that is this close to Big Brother. And I'm thankful that I am about to go on Social Security and that I won't be around to see war become equal peace.
I think, aren't you channeling Larry Ellison? Wasn't he the guy who made the famous line, something along the lines of, just get over it. There is no privacy anymore.
It could have been.
This is more than a decade. As soon as you opened up your first PC and got onto the internet, you gave up your privacy because everybody was initially asking for your information, and then they just decided just to take it because you just agreed to this, this laundry list of permissions that you gave everybody that you never read. So we gave up and now, of course, there are Ring doorbells on every door. There are security cameras above every store. It's amazing watching the FBI investigate the attack on the Capitol on 1/6 and how much footage there is of this bomber that they still haven't caught yet. There's this enormous amount of footage of this individual walking here and walking there. I can't believe how much footage there is of this individual. And even 5 years ago when that happened, that would never have happened. So the whole idea that Apple is now going to allow us to choose them not to take only this much of our information, thanks, but it's way too little and way too late.
Wow. Well, let's hit one more topic, and then I want to really go to predictions for next week. I think, Rob, you teed this one up. Our good old federal government, they want to provide subsidies for student broadband, And by the way,
yes, I read about this for Fast Company. That was 2 weeks ago, I think. And this is an interesting case where, even a lot of the more free market minded think tanks agree that, we should do something about it. This is a case of market failure. Students need some kind of broadband to learn. And so it's coming in 2 ways. And the one that, both of which could go wrong. There's a long history of ill-spent broadband subsidies. So one of them is there's going to be a program by which you can get $50 coupons to pay for your broadband, which, there's a whole verification process. There's eligibility requirements. Not anybody can get it. You won't get this automatically, but seems to be a good idea because, if you're a student in America in 2021, you need a functioning internet connection. The other one is to allow schools and libraries to have broadband that goes beyond their own property, beyond their own boundary lines, to eliminate the problem of, the closest library to me, there's a sign next to the parking lot saying public Wi-Fi here. So students who need bandwidth, they can hang out in their mom's car or their dad's car and get their homework done that way, which seems like a pretty crummy way of doing it.
Right.
And so both of these things, they tackle affordability issues. They can't do, you can do a little bit for availability if the schools and libraries broadband part of it, which was in the just passed American Rescue Plan, does extend bandwidth coverage a little more than what we get right now. But it's at least an effort to grapple seriously with it. And some people have been speaking about this for a while. I had a quote in my story from the acting chair of the FCC, Jessica Rosenworcel, pointing out that the homework gap, it's real. It exists in urban America, rural America. The quote is from 2019. So I'm glad we are now taking it more seriously. But what do you do about places that have no broadband? You know, Starlink will get there at some point, but it's not going to fix it for everybody.
No, and yeah.
Go ahead, John.
Well, I was going to say Starlink has a arrangement. They're experimenting with it in Ohio in some rural areas because there's never going to be cable. 5G is never going to reach those communities. You can't reach us in Vermont. It's just not a practical thing. So it's one of the few options, but it's expensive. Starlink is wicked expensive. The package is like $500 to ship it to you, and then another $100 a month just for internet service. No phone service, no streaming channels, no anything else. So most families in those communities couldn't really afford that. They tend to be, lower income and not a lot of employment opportunities. So, yeah, a subsidy I think would help definitely if you could reach those people.
Stuart?
Yeah.
I just wrote a column about all of this, which has not yet appeared, so I can't point anybody anywhere. But a lot of this is all part of, I did a column in October, November called We Need a Broadband New Deal. And akin to what FDR did in 1933 to bring electrification to rural areas. And there was this broad federal policy and a single agency, the Rural Electrification Agency, that was in charge of making sure that the 10% of farms that had access to electricity grew within 15 years to about 80% of farms. It was a singular agency that was responsible only for that. The problem that we're having now, that all of these rural broadband, expanded 5G, improving the FCC definition of broadband from 25 download 3 up to either 50 or 100 has been stalled for a while. The problem in the federal government right now is that nobody is in charge of broadband policy, and all of these ad hoc methods. For instance, the federal subsidy for the student broadband, you have to apply for it online, which is one of the funniest catch-22s I've ever run into, because you need broadband in order to apply to get broadband.
You can do it on a phone. I did check the
I understand. It's still part of a program that isn't even up and running right now. They've moved up the Office of Science and Technology to cabinet level, and the guy who has been nominated to be the secretary of this at the cabinet level is Dr. Eric Lander, who is a microbiologist. Jessica Rosenworcel right now is the acting head of the FCC, and they haven't filled Ajit Pai's seat, so the FCC can't do anything about the E-rate, which is the other part of the subsidy plan to expand beyond schools and libraries to fill that homeward gap. So right now, and the rural 5G programs and the rural broadband efforts are scattered across a half a dozen different Senate and House committees, agencies. For instance, the Agriculture Department has one piece of the rural broadband package. They have to update the broadband map so they know exactly where they're lacking in broadband, and the broadband map only includes wired broadband, not wireless or fixed wireless. So the issues on this are so wide and so scattered all over the place, and nobody is in charge in trying to figure out what has to happen, and there's nobody in charge to make any decisions.
Stuart, you're just full of optimism on this podcast.
It's funny. President Biden on January 20th sent an open letter to Dr. Lander, or whoever the nominee for that position. This was before he nominated Dr. Lander. And it's a 5-point plan on what that Office of Science and Technology is supposed to be doing. The words digital and communications are each mentioned once, and neither are in the same sentence. Most of the want list that President Biden put out covers global health issues and as well as domestic health issues and climate change. Those are the primary things that office is going to focus on. And how the FCC fits into this, it's really just a giant mess, especially since they don't even know when the hearings for this guy are actually even going to be scheduled in the Senate.
Well, and let me just wrap it up there, because it's pretty sad when you consider the fact is if the pandemic has really revealed one unsettling thing about America, there is a broadband divide, and especially with this mad, focus on educating kids at home, rural communities, inner city communities without really good broadband or no broadband at all have suffered enormously, and something's got to be done. There's no question about it. But let's conclude the call on my favorite topic, and I'll give you 30 seconds each, and that is predictions. Like the old. That wasn't firing line. It was the McLaughlin report. Didn't they do that at the end?
Report, yeah. Absolute metaphysical certainty, or what was the other end of the scale?
I forget what I was. We're all dating ourselves. The fact that we know that show,
right?
But Rob, let's start with you. Your prediction.
So I talked earlier about this sort of virtuous circle of competition between Apple and Google. There's a little bit of that going on with developers. First, Apple decided to throw a bone to developers who were tired of getting dinged for 30% of pretty much all the money that goes through an iOS app unless it buys a real world good or service. And they said, we'll cut our take to 15% if you're a developer who makes less than $1 million a year on the App Store. And at the time I tweeted, I expect Google to follow this in 2 months elapsed. Google announced that they will cut their take on the Play Store from 30% to 15% on the first $1 million a developer makes, period. You could be a $20 million a year developer. They'll still have the sort of progressive tax rate. Right. I got to think Apple's going to follow suit, because the system they have now is you can, graduate from this and get whacked at 30%. So we have developers who will try to stay under $1 million a year, like run negative ads against their app or something in December to tank their sales. They're making work for themselves. And I think it would do everyone a big favor if Apple would just say, yeah, your first $1 million, you get to keep 85% of that too.
John, your prediction.
Oh gosh, I keep waiting for the other Peloton to drop. There's this attitude of, there's growing attitude in Silicon Valley and these companies of, if I just don't say anything, it'll just go away.
PR people, it does not work.
Yeah, Tesla doesn't even have PR people or anybody to respond, or SpaceX. You can call and email, but they're just never going to respond. They have a serious problem now. They're trying to do something that they don't have the technology to do, which is to do autonomous driving. They simply don't have the basic technology to do that. So they're going to be under investigation. But Peloton was the most recent case where they've had a fatality on it. Look, we know from Facebook's and Sheryl Sandberg, look, it's a dangerous thing, a treadmill. Her husband had an accident, and, so there was a fatality on a Peloton. What did Peloton do? Said nothing about it. Said, gee, we're sorry about that fatality, but didn't say anything about how it happened, what I could do as a parent to prevent it from happening. They were just silent on it. But I think that's going to come back to haunt them. I mean, consumer affairs are much more important now, and relations, and you can't just do that with a product and just expect it to go away.
Let's just offer the family a discount on the next Peloton model that comes out. Stuart, predictions.
Other than the Mets winning the National League pennant? Oh, other than that, okay. Mobile World Congress has been pushed to June 28th, and if they think they're having an in-person convention in Barcelona in June and July, they're nuts. I don't know if they're making plans to turn this into a virtual event, but with what's going on in Europe right now, I cannot imagine them having an in-person show in June.
But I want to go. I really
I
want
want to go too, but I just can't see how they're going to do it. Especially since even here in the U.S. they're predicting, another wave of these, extra viruses that are hanging around. So the thought that they're going to have even if they have a viable show, it's just, I'm very optimistic of them.
Yeah.
Well, you're just full of optimism. I don't know if I want to invite you on.
I'm sure the Mets are going to win the pennant.
I'll tell you what. I'll end the podcast is my predictions. The Yankees are going to win the American League East by 15 games, and they're going to sweep through the playoffs and into the World Series. And that's really a pretty big. I would actually delete that from the podcast during post-production. Never happened. So, in any event, guys, really thank you for spending the time with me on today's podcast. Thank you for listening to the podcast to the More Insights and Strategy audience. Please follow us on our social media partners. That's Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And until next time, have a great week.